Around 2500 BCE, while Egypt raised its timeless pyramids under the desert sun, another kingdom stirred further south along the Nile. This was Kush, a land of warriors, iron, and gold, destined to one day challenge the pharaohs themselves, far beyond the borders of ancient Egypt. In the region we now call Northern Sudan, a powerful culture began to rise. Archaeologists call it the Kerma culture, and by 2500 BCE, it had transformed from a scattered community of herders and farmers into a state with cities, temples, and kings. At its heart stood Kerma, the capital, a city unlike any Egypt had ever seen. Here rose the Defufas, massive mud brick temples and fortresses, some towering nearly 18 meters high. To those approaching by the Nile, the Defufas must have looked like mountain fortresses carved by human hands. They were not only religious sanctuaries, but also political centers, where kings of Kush commanded armies, controlled trade, and oversaw a population of tens of thousands. By 2000 BCE, Kerma ruled over nearly 400 kilometers of the Nile Valley, with a population exceeding 20,000. Its lifeblood was the river itself. Each year, the Nile's floods turned the desert soil fertile, producing harvests of sorghum and millet that could feed as many as 50,000 people. Alongside this, Kush's wealth came from cattle herds and, most famously, from gold. Mines in the Wadi Alaki region produced nearly a ton of gold each year, much of which made its way north into Egyptian treasuries. Kush was also a land of trade and luxury. Caravans carried ivory, ebony, incense, and leopard skins, which Egyptian nobles craved. In return, Kushites imported copper, linen, and fine Egyptian crafts. Yet behind this commerce lay tension, for Egypt saw Kush not as an equal, but as a resource to exploit. The Egyptians called them vile Kushites in their records, dismissing them as barbarians. But Kushites were far from weak. Their warriors were famed as masters of the bow, so deadly that Egypt would later name the southern frontier Tarseti, the land of the bow. When Egypt raided for gold and slaves during the Old Kingdom, the Kushites retaliated with lightning raids, striking with long-range arrows and vanishing into the desert. By the Middle Kingdom, 2055-1650 BCE, Egypt realized Kush was no minor foe. To block their advances, the pharaohs built massive forts at Semna and other sites. Yet even these could not hold back Kushite resistance. Around 1680 BCE, they stormed and captured Buhan, one of Egypt's most important southern strongholds. Life inside Kush was highly organized. Society was ruled by divine kings, buried in monumental tumuli graves, accompanied by hundreds of sacrificed servants and warriors, a display of absolute authority. Unlike Egypt, women in Kush held significant influence. Queens and royal mothers often played decisive roles in succession, with matrilineal inheritance shaping dynasties for centuries to come. Their gods, too, were unique. The ram-headed deity of Kush would later merge with the Egyptian god Amun, creating a shared religious bridge between the two civilizations. But by the New Kingdom, 1550-1070 BCE, Egypt struck back with full force. Pharaohs like Thutmose III swept south, conquering Kerma itself around 1450 BCE. The Defufas were destroyed and thousands of Nubians were enslaved, 7,000 in a single campaign. Egypt annexed Kush as a colony, draining its wealth and demanding annual tribute, tons of gold, herds of cattle, and endless soldiers. Yet this conquest came with irony. While Egypt imposed its gods and temples on Kush, it also absorbed Kushites into its armies and society. Nubian archers became elite troops feared across the empire. The Medjay, Egypt's police force, was entirely Nubian. Kushites filled Egyptian cities, their culture blending slowly with that of their conquerors. Still, resentment simmered. Egyptian art often portrayed Nubians as submissive, dark-skinned servants, bowing before the pharaohs. But beneath the surface, Kush's spirit endured. When Egypt's new kingdom crumbled around 1070 BCE, its hold over Kush collapsed. At Napata, near the sacred mountain of Gebel Barkal, Kushite leaders revived their traditions. They fused Egyptian religion with their own, creating a powerful theocracy where oracles of Amun could decide who would rule. And in this rebirth, Kush held an advantage Egypt could not ignore. By 850 BCE, while Egyptians still relied on bronze, Kushites mastered ironworking. Stronger weapons, sharper blades, and deadlier arrows gave them a military edge. One by one, ambitious rulers such as King Alara united the Nile Valley under Kushite leadership. By forging marriage ties with Egyptian nobles, they gained legitimacy in the eyes of both peoples. Thus, by 747 BCE, Kush was no longer the conquered land of the south. It was a rising empire, armed with iron, rich in gold, and blessed by Amun. The stage was set for a dramatic reversal, the day the so-called vile Kushites would wear the double crown of Egypt itself. When Egypt's golden age collapsed into chaos, a new power awakened in the south. In Napata, beneath the sacred shadow of Gebel Barkal, Kush's kings prepared to reclaim what Egypt had stolen. The fall of Egypt's new kingdom in 1070 BCE left a vacuum of power. Pharaohs no longer controlled the south. Their empire fractured into rival dynasties. Yet in Nubia, the people of Kush seized the opportunity. From their stronghold at Napata, near the holy mountain Gebel Barkal, they rebuilt their identity. Napata was not just a city, it was a sanctuary. Egyptians had long believed Gebel Barkal was the dwelling place of Amun, the supreme god. Now Kushite priests and kings transformed this belief into their own strength. Temples rose again, oracles of Amun declared rulers, and Napata became both a religious and political capital. Kush's rulers cleverly blended traditions. They adopted Egyptian gods and hieroglyphs, but kept their matrilineal succession system, where queens and royal mothers shaped dynasties. This created stability in an era when Egypt itself was crumbling. At the same time, Kush's mastery of ironworking began to set them apart. While Egypt clung to bronze weapons, Kushite blacksmiths forged iron spears, swords, and plows. This innovation gave them not only military superiority, but also agricultural expansion, feeding larger populations and supporting stronger armies. By 900 BCE, Kush had regained independence. Their warriors feared across the Nile Valley. Trade flourished once again. Gold, ivory, and incense flowed north, while Egyptian artisans, priests, and refugees brought skills and knowledge south. Slowly, Kush became the heir to both Nubian traditions and Egyptian legacy. It was during this rebirth that King Alara rose to power around 785 BCE. He is remembered as the first great ruler of the Napatan dynasty. Alara consolidated Kush's lands and began forging alliances with Egypt itself. Through marriage ties with Theban noble families, Kushite kings gained legitimacy and influence inside Egypt's sacred heart. Egypt, meanwhile, was broken. The Delta was ruled by Libyan-descended chiefs. Thebes was dominated by priests, and rival dynasties fought endlessly. In this chaos, Kush grew stronger. By 760 BCE, Alara's successors, including Kashta, father of Piye, were already extending Kushite power into Upper Egypt. In Thebes, they were not seen as invaders, but as saviors, protectors of Amun's temple at Karnak. When Kashta's daughter was installed as divine adoratrix of Amun, Kush achieved more than conquest. It achieved legitimacy in Egyptian religion itself. Thus, by the mid-8th century BCE, Kush was no longer the shadow of Egypt. It was a kingdom reborn, armed with iron, blessed by Amun, and poised to reclaim the throne of the pharaohs. As Egypt fought itself, Kush waited, and when the time was right, a king from Napata would march north, not with destruction, but with destiny. By 747 BCE, Egypt had sunk into fragmentation. The once mighty land of the pharaohs was divided into dozens of petty kingdoms. In the delta, Libyan dynasties squabbled for power. In Thebes, priests clung to Amun's temple. To the north, foreign mercenaries carved out chiefdoms. From the south, Kush watched. And then King Piye, known also as Pianki, made his move. Piye inherited a strong, unified Kush from his father Kashta. By this time, Kushite authority stretched far into Upper Egypt. Piye was not merely a king. He styled himself as Amun's chosen, destined to reunify the Nile Valley. His devotion to the god was absolute, and his campaign was as much religious as it was political. In the 20th year of his reign, c. 727 BCE, Piye marched north with an army of 10,000, including 2,000 elite archers, famed for their deadly composite bows. His fleet of 100 ships carried warriors and supplies up the Nile. His target was not destruction, but submission. The story is preserved on the Gabel Barkal Stela, a massive granite inscription detailing Piye's words and deeds. At Hermopolis, local rulers surrendered without resistance, offering hundreds of horses in tribute. Piye accepted, sparing lives and cities, a stark contrast to Egypt's usual brutality. At Thebes, Piye entered Karnak in triumph, performing sacred rituals to Amun. He installed his sister, Amanirenas, as divine adoratress of Amun, cementing Kushite control over Egypt's spiritual heart. The priests welcomed him as the god's champion, but the greatest challenge was still ahead. Memphis, Egypt's ancient capital. Its walls loomed high, guarded by loyalists of the Libyan prince Tefnut. For a week, Piye's navy blockaded the city, while archers rained down arrows on its defenders. Eventually, Memphis surrendered. Tefnut fled, and Piye entered the city not as a conqueror, but as a restorer. At the temple of Ptah, he offered sacrifices, declaring himself pharaoh, lord of two lands. The Delta rulers quickly followed. One by one, they sent tribute oxen, gold, and slaves. Piye showed mercy, sparing them all, but demanding absolute loyalty. By the end of his campaign, Piye had achieved what seemed impossible: control over 200 kilometers of the Nile Valley, from Kush to the Delta, with minimal bloodshed. In 716 BCE, Piye returned to Napata, leaving Egypt under his authority. At Gebel Barkal, he built victory temples depicting Egyptian kings bowing before him. His pyramid at El Kuru, steep and Nubian in style, stood as a monument to a new age. The Kushites had not only conquered Egypt, they had reclaimed it. For the first time in history, the pharaoh's double crown sat upon an African king from the south. They called themselves pharaohs, sons of Ra, but history would remember them as something more: the Black Pharaohs of Kush, rulers who revived Egypt's greatness even as empires gathered to crush them. When Piye died in 716 BCE, his dream of unity passed to his brother Shabaka. Where Piye was merciful, Shabaka was determined. He solidified Kushite authority, crushing rebels in the Delta and moving Egypt's political center closer to Kushite power. Shabaka's reign brought a cultural renaissance. He revived monumental building, restoring temples in both Kush and Egypt. At Thebes, he expanded Karnak, presenting himself as Amun's favored son. In Memphis, he commissioned what became known as the Shabaka stone, a text preserving ancient religious traditions. Kushite pharaohs blended Nubian and Egyptian traditions. Their pyramids at El Kuru and later at Nuri stood taller and steeper than those of Giza. Their statues bore distinctly African features: broad noses, curly hair, proudly declaring their heritage. Shabaka was succeeded by Shabitku, and then by the most famous Kushite pharaoh, Taharqa, 690–664 BCE. Taharqa ruled at a time of both glory and crisis. Under him, Egypt flourished once again. He built vast temples, canals, and fortresses, restoring Egypt's faded grandeur. The Bible even mentions him. In Isaiah 37, Taharqa, king of Kush, is said to have aided Jerusalem against Assyrian invasion. But the Assyrians were rising fast. Their armies, armed with iron and siege engines, swept across the Near East, threatening Egypt itself. Taharqa fought them fiercely, but by 671 BCE, Assyria invaded Egypt, capturing Memphis and sacking Thebes. Kushite power faltered. Taharqa retreated south, yet his legacy endured. For nearly a century, the Kushite pharaohs had not only ruled Egypt, but revitalized it. They restored its temples, revived its religion, and proved that Africa's kings could sit on the throne of the pharaohs with equal majesty. But history is cruel. When Taharqa's successor Tanutamani attempted to reclaim Egypt in 664 BCE, the Assyrians crushed him. The Kushite dynasty was forced back to Napata. Egypt passed into the hands of new rulers, and the Black Pharaohs were erased from Egyptian records. Driven from Egypt by the Assyrians, the Black Pharaohs retreated south. But this was not an ending. In Nubia, their power endured, and in time it gave birth to a new empire, the Kingdom of Meroë. After the fall of Thebes in 664 BCE, Kush's kings returned to Napata. Egypt was lost, but Kush itself thrived. From Napata, rulers like Tanutamani and his descendants continued to build pyramids, temples, and fortresses. Their devotion to Amun remained unshaken, and Gebel Barkal remained a holy center. By the 4th century BCE, however, Kush shifted its capital further south, to Meroë, near the 6th cataract of the Nile. This move opened access to iron ore deposits and trade routes to the Red Sea. It marked the beginning of the Meroitic Age, a new era of power and innovation. Meroë became famous as the City of Iron. Vast furnaces smelted ore, producing thousands of weapons and tools each year. Blackened slag heaps still remain today, testimony to an industry unmatched in Africa. Meroë's wealth also came from gold mines, ivory, and trade with Ptolemaic Egypt, Arabia, and even India. The kings of Meroë built more than 200 pyramids, steep-sided and clustered in royal cemeteries. Unlike the grand but few pyramids of Giza, Meroë's pyramids were numerous, each a testament to Nubia's lasting tradition. The Meroitic script also emerged, one of Africa's earliest written languages, blending Egyptian hieroglyphs with Nubian symbols. Though still only partly understood, it represents a uniquely African intellectual achievement. Religion evolved too. The ram-headed Amun remained central, but new deities unique to Nubia appeared in art and temples. Queens, known as Kandakes, rose to unprecedented power, sometimes ruling independently. One such queen, Amanirenas, famously defied Rome itself. Meroë endured for centuries, long after Egypt fell to Persians, Greeks, and Romans. But by 350 CE, the rising power of Aksum in Ethiopia conquered Meroë, ending the kingdom's long reign. Yet the memory of Kush, Napata, and Meroë never died. It survived in oral traditions, in pyramids rising from the desert sands, and in the DNA of the people of Sudan. For centuries, the Black Pharaohs were erased. Their names chiseled out, their monuments defaced, their memory buried. But history has a way of returning to the surface. After the fall of Kushite rule in Egypt, their memory was deliberately destroyed. The 26th Dynasty Pharaohs of Egypt erased Kushite cartouches from temples. Ptolemaic and Roman rulers dismissed them as Ethiopians, foreigners unworthy of Egypt's throne. Greek. Historians like Herodotus describe them vaguely as long-lived Ethiopians with burnt skin, emphasizing their otherness. Roman writers ignored their achievements altogether. By the medieval period, Nubia was reduced on European maps to a blank space labeled unknown. Yet the monuments remained, The pyramids of Meroë and Napata stood half-buried in sand, silent witnesses to a forgotten empire. Local Sudanese oral traditions preserved fragments of memory, speaking of warrior queens and kings of the south. In the modern era, rediscovery began. Napoleon's 1798 expedition to Egypt ignored Nubia, but soon after explorers and scholars turned south. In 1822, Jean-François Champollion cracked the Rosetta Stone, and Kushite cartouches emerged from the dust. German explorer Lepsius mapped Gebel Barkal in the 1840s. The great excavations of the early 20th century, led by George Reisner of Harvard, uncovered pyramids at Nuri and El Kuru. There, Reisner found the tomb of Taharqa, complete with statues, artifacts, and hundreds of Shabti figurines. At Meroë, archaeologists uncovered furnaces and smelters, confirming the city's vast iron industry. Still, colonial bias persisted. European scholars often downplayed Kushite achievements, crediting Egypt instead. Only in the late 20th century did scholars like Cheikh Anta Diop and Frank Snowden reclaim the narrative, proving that the 25th dynasty was not a footnote, but a central chapter of African history. By the 21st century, science confirmed what history had long hidden. A 2017 DNA study revealed that 25th dynasty mummies had strong sub-Saharan ancestry, directly linking them to modern Sudanese populations. The erasure was ending. The Black Pharaohs were no longer forgotten. They ruled Egypt for less than a century, but their legacy, written in pyramids, DNA, and memory, reshaped Africa's place in world history. Today, the story of the Black Pharaohs is no longer hidden. From the sands of Nubia, their pyramids rise, steeper and more numerous than those of Giza. At Gebel Barkal, sacred temples still bear their names. In museums across the world, artifacts stolen during colonialism are slowly being returned to Sudan. Their cultural legacy is vast. The Kushites revived Egyptian religion, empowered women through matrilineal succession, and infused African art into pharaonic culture. Their pyramids at Nuri and Meroe remain icons of Nubian identity. Their warriors, archers, and queens became legends. Globally, their influence echoes in history and faith. The Bible records Taharqa as a defender of Jerusalem. Greek and Roman myths of long-lived Ethiopians were inspired by them. Modern African movements reclaim them as proof that Africa was not only part of civilization, it was its beating heart. In 2018, UNESCO recognized Nubian monuments as World Heritage Sites. In 2025, Sudan announced the repatriation of hundreds of Kushite artifacts from British and German museums. Excavations continue, revealing new temples, palaces, and even possible royal tombs still hidden beneath the sands. But perhaps the greatest legacy of the Black Pharaohs is symbolic. For centuries, history painted Egypt as a Mediterranean civilization, severed from Africa. The Kushites prove otherwise. They show that Africa shaped the Nile, that African kings once wore the double crown, and that black skin once sat proudly on Egypt's throne. Their story is not just history. It is a reclamation of identity, a reminder that Africa's empires were not lost. They were deliberately forgotten, only to rise again. The Black Pharaohs' time may have ended in 656 BCE, but their legacy lives on. In the deserts of Sudan, in the bloodlines of its people, and in the awakening of a global history that finally gives Africa its rightful place.